Ultra and welcome to the Talking Blarney podcast, where we call out Hollywood for its paddywhackery in films and TV about Ireland. My name is Stuart McNamara, and I'm here with my co-host Ross Cross.
What even? Who even is that? I don't know. It's Rob here, your other guy. Hello, Stu.
How's it going, Rob? How's your week been? First podcast out and everything?
Good. Oh yeah, the messages of support have been coming in. You know, my mother, my girlfriend, my nana, they're all there.
The first thing we could talk about is a bit of news about Irish films.
Yes.
Have you seen the image of Brendan Gleason as Donald Trump?
I have. It's sure is something.
It's just a silhouette right now. My God, it looks like it could be Trump.
He's got the hair. He's got just the stance and everything.
Yeah, so Brendan Gleason is playing Donald Trump in the upcoming miniseries The Comey Rule. Be out in November, and it's scary accurate.
Yeah, it looks interesting. You know, I think anything with Donnie Trump at the moment is a bit interesting. There's anything evocative.
The other big bit of Irish film news, I suppose, is they released the trailer for the Foundation TV show.
I wouldn't really be an expert on this now at all. I haven't really seen it, but I heard decent things.
It's pretty hard sci-fi, but the reason that it relates to Ireland is that it's actually filmed in Limerick City in Troy Studios.
Yeah, it's good to see. I think they had that other sci-fi series that they shot there as well had come out.
Yeah, the George R. R. Martin one that flopped. Really bad.
Unfortunately, but oh well, third time's the charm.
Yeah. We'll get there eventually. We'll get there.
Yep.
So we're going to start a new segment now called Uniquely Irish.
Yes.
So just for a lot of our listeners who might not be from Ireland, we're going to break down each week a topic that just kind of exemplifies Ireland, get into a little detail, and just give you a good overview of what Irishness really is.
I think this is an important thing we're going to talk about now. It certainly plays a role in the film we're going to talk about.
Oh yeah, it was quite handy that we picked this one.
Yeah, almost like we planned it.
Well, we never plan anything because we don't know what we're doing.
I watched Darby Gill again. That's the film we're talking about, right?
Darby Gill Part 2, yes? Rise of the Little People. So, on Uniquely Irish this week, we're talking Guinness.
Yes.
And we have a bit of an expert here who's done pretty much a TED Talk on Guinness. So we'll let him start us off.
I did do that. I did a brief... I got to the finals of a national speaking competition called FameLab, talking about Guinness and how it works, the science behind it. So Guinness is Irish, you'd be shocked to hear. It is a stout, which some people mightn't know what exactly it is. A stout is basically like a beer, but it's quite heavy. It's definitely heavier in kind of volume than kind of your American beer. But it's the black stuff, a pint of plain. It's many names like that, and it's I think an acquired taste, would you say, Stu?
Yeah, definitely. It takes a bit to get into it, but once you're into it, it's a lovely, smooth drink.
Yeah, and I think I definitely order it, you know, in a pub, which, as we're in a lockdown at the moment, and the pubs aren't quite open yet, I certainly missed it quite a lot.
Oh, yeah. Because one thing that is one of the big rules for Guinness is you do not drink it from a can.
Although they have a fancy widget thing in a can that
does not matter.
But I just say
because as we both know, they have done scientific studies on the perfect pour of a Guinness.
Yeah, well, pretty much if you order Guinness in a pub, and I've seen a lot of Americans do this, and don't be the one to do it, you'll see that they fill it almost up to the top and then leave it off to the side. This doesn't mean it's done and that you can take it and sit down. It's done in 2 pours. The proper way that Guinness recommend you do it is you fill the glass up until the harp, you leave it aside for just under 2 minutes, and then you fill it up to the top. Originally, this was because Guinness would be out of 2 different barrels. Before we had like the complicated like nitrogen systems and taps and pubs now, they had 2 different barrels at 2 different pressures. Now it's brewed with nitrogen instead of CO2, so that's what causes the head to form on it, along with the actual shape of the glass itself. So if you want a proper pint of Guinness, you need a proper Guinness glass, and you need to have it poured properly for you as well.
You did remind me there of the tale of our good American friend, who when we were in the pub one day...
Oh, God.
Yeah. I know, it's the funniest story.
Oh,
he went
God.
to buy a Guinness.
He did.
They gave the half pour and put it down in front of him, and he paid and left with his half pint. And he came back to the table, and we thought, did you drink half of the pint already?
Because it hasn't settled.
Yeah, and he said, no, he just gave me half a pint. And so first off, we laughed. And then we laughed some more. Eventually we convinced him to go back up with one of us to convince the barman that he had wandered off with only half a pint and hadn't just chugged half of it, and we were trying to swindle him out of more pint.
So that's don't do that, basically. There's a way of doing it. And also, when you get given your Guinness, don't immediately start drinking it. It has to settle. It's going to be like slightly brown. It's actually red. Guinness is a very dark shade of red. It's not black at all. Once it looks like it's gone entirely black the whole way up, then it's settled, then drink it. And of course, always drink the head last. You drink it through the head. Don't drink the head first. You will destroy the consistency of it.
And if anyone ever draws a shamrock in your Guinness head, slap them in the fucking face.
I was over in Scotland a couple of days after St. Patrick's Day on a trip, and there was an English barman there, and I came up and ordered a Guinness because I was like, you got to try a Guinness in every country you go to, and I was like,
all bad. Every Guinness outside of Ireland is bad.
Having said that, I did have a good pint in Scotland when I went back there the second time, but anyway. But this English fella was behind the bar, and he poured me the Guinness. He did the second pour, and I was like, all right, maybe this will be okay. Then he put it in front of me, and I saw that shamrock, and I just looked down, looked back up at him, and then just looked back down again. He was like, there's something wrong there. And I was like, oh no, it's perfectly fine. I think the Scottish bar manager behind him had just seen what had happened. He was like, oh, sorry about that, and just did a fresh one for me. And I think had a quiet words, like, never do that to an actual Irish person.
Well, never do that to an actual Guinness would be my thought, but what can you do?
Yeah.
So I think that'll probably about do it for Uniquely Irish this week, the tentatively named show.
I really want to pint again.
After the show, Rob, after the show.
We're so pumped.
We'll find somewhere. Then we have the movie itself. So this week it's Chasing Leprechauns.
Yes, I think this movie is kind of responsible for this podcast coming into being.
Yeah, it's pretty special in our hearts.
I suppose I'll tell the story now as good as any. I was staying over at Stu's one night, and pretty much we woke up in the morning. I think we went to have breakfast. And I think we were flicking around the TV. I think it was on RTE, which is like our national channel, and this film was on, and it was like we could see it was Ireland. It was like, oh, it's that guy from Heroes is on it, and it was in like the winter time. Like, oh, that was probably shot that a couple of years back, and then we saw what's it about, Leprechauns. I was like, I guess we'll watch it, and it was oddly endearing in kind of a way, but it was definitely very paddy-whackery.
Mostly because we spent the entire time taking the piss out of it.
Yes, we did.
It's not a terrible movie.
No.
It's just a bad movie.
It's made by the Hallmark channel. It's very much a made-for-TV Hallmark film.
I think this is probably the only Hallmark movie I've ever seen, and it's very much made for an American audience, and so it has a lot of the kind of tropes that you'd see. I would say it's not a terrible film. It's not an awful film. I think it was shot quite well. There's, I think, for the most part, quite good acting in it. We'll get more specific about it in a moment. It's just very American. This is like the prime example of, paddy-whackery, what all Americans think Ireland is like. And in fairness, though, they do one or two things that refute it, which we'll get into.
We will. There's a couple of bits here. But I suppose I'll start off. It's really still your standard film. I would go as far as saying kind of inspired by The Field almost a little bit by John B. Keane. Basically, we have our main character Michael, played by Adrian Pastor, who's Pastor, I suppose. Americans are weird with names. It's like Mahoney or something like that. Who I forgot was in this film until I rewatched it. I was like, oh, it's Nathan Petretti from Heroes. He's also done a bunch of other wonderful things, but his boss is like, oh, we want to set up this factory in Ireland. We bought the land, but there's some issue with leprechauns living there. There's a local ordinance that says we have to make sure there's no leprechauns. I'm sending you to Ireland to get this sorted.
Yeah, he's like a fixer or something.
Yeah, he's like a corporate fixer, basically. So he goes over to Ireland, to Ballyglen, which is in an unspecified part of Ireland.
Yeah.
Although I would say it was shot in County Wicklow, near where they have a film studio. To their credit, this was actually shot in Ireland.
Yeah, I think every main actor,
apart
from Adrian Pastor,
and
is actually
and his boss.
Well, yes, of course, but
as far as I can see. So he goes there and he's like, oh, he meets the mayor and the mayor's assistant, and then he's told, oh, go to the pub because it's Ireland. Of course, you got to go to the pub. And the pub owner there, Sarah, played by Amy Huberman, who's married to Brian O'Driscoll, a former captain of the Irish rugby team, who we'll talk a bit more about in a moment. He's also the leprechaun expert, as well as running a pub. He also meets the owl fella there, Seamus, played by Terry Byrne, who's very much the Darby O'Gill of this film in many ways.
Yeah.
Got that kind of outfit in the pub feel. He doesn't really strike it off with Sarah too well, and he asks the landlady staying with Evelyn for a little bit of advice, and eventually he gets it off a little bit with Sarah and kind of starts to see that maybe there's something up with these little people on the land. He starts missing his keys, and funny things start happening, like getting locked in a telephone box.
Basically, they start fucking with him.
They do start fucking with him, and a very important part of, as we talked about leprechauns the last time, the trickster.
Yeah.
So eventually he kind of gets in there with the local people a little bit more, kind of starts romancing Sarah a little bit. He kind of falls for a bit, and they kind of hit it off after having a nice cup of tea on a lovely mountainside in the beautiful Irish winter, which they got very lucky with the weather they got for this film.
Yeah, we can kind of tell exactly what year this film was from.
Yeah.
Because it's the only time we've gotten snow in the last 10 years.
Yeah, particularly that heavy snow up in this Wicklow Mountains where this was shot, and you can tell straight away. So they just got very, very lucky, but eventually it gets kind of off with Sarah a little bit. There's a nice bit of a thing where he tries to become Irish. But has, of course, a lovely, fantastic line there, Stu, where he goes to Seamus the elephant and says, I want to be Irish. And Seamus says, well, are you Irish? And in the ancestry, he goes, not really. And he says, well, you've got one thing going for you. You're not English.
Hey.
Which I think is the one bit we remember from this film.
I mean, we burst out laughing when we heard that.
Yeah.
To start off, we have no problem with English people now.
Don't.
There's a lot of history there that we will probably go through in a future podcast.
Yes.
But it's just funny because that is the sentiment that a guy like that might have in a small town in the middle of Ireland. That's why it's funny.
It's a very accurate portrayal, I think.
Yeah.
And we'll talk more about the characters, of course, but I just thought that was the standout moment of the film for me.
Yeah.
And that's it. So like he ends up getting more Irish, gets his paddy cap, gets used to eating the full Irish breakfast, including the dreaded black pudding, which is one lovely actually.
See, part of the problem with that is that she calls it blood pudding. No one in Ireland calls it blood pudding.
That's what
black pudding.
That's what the English call it.
Yeah,
we call it black pudding.
It is blood pudding.
Or black pudding.
But it's black pudding.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I think that was a perfect time for an American joke where he's like, but pudding's a dessert.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, if your chocolate pudding is black, I would sincerely question about eating it, to be brutally honest with you. So, he gets used to it. He becomes basically an Irishman.
Cultural appropriation.
Cultural appropriation.
We don't care. Anyone can be Irish if they want.
To the point where he plays Gaelic football, which is our version of soccer kind of mixed with... I'd say kind of a full contact kind of sport almost.
Yeah.
It's certainly portrayed as quite aggressive in this film, which isn't exactly untrue. You're allowed to shoulder tackle people.
It's like the weirdest mix of soccer, rugby, and volleyball.
I think like it's like we have a thing where we like do an exchange with the Aussie rules football in Australia every now and again. We have a game against them with our two different styles, and it's probably the closest to that because it's like imagine soccer, but you can pick the ball up and you can also like half bait the shite out of people. I think isn't in an accurate way.
Yeah,
you know, what was that thing in that film? It's like hurling is an Irish version of a fight that breaks out in a hockey pitch. I'm like,
makes sense.
Makes sense. So he gets that, and eventually he decides, I'm going to try and romance Sarah at the Céilí, which is like a big Irish trad dancing thing, which I suppose it's not an inaccurate portrayal in the film. I thought it was a bit overdone.
We're kind of both city slickers, so we don't see a lot of Céilís, or any, but it does happen in smaller towns. So it wouldn't be inaccurate to have one there. Generally
speaking, I thought it wasn't a million miles off. I just thought it was you don't really get the large kind of group dancing thing. There are dances that's with more them. Like, you know, there are like the Walls of Limerick and the Siege of Venice. There are kind of like dances like that where you're kind of having like large groups of partners. But generally, Irish dancing is a solo thing, or you'd be dancing with people, but it's not quite like the way they were doing in the film.
And they normally have it in like the town hall, you know.
It's not normally, it's not normally in a pub. It's not like you'd have a trad session there, which is just a bunch of like people playing traditional Irish music, on which the actual
chalkboard outside,
which they do. But I just think it was a bit. It's not necessary. It's like this thing, like the whole, like a lot of parts of the film are. It's not a million miles away. It's got the right idea. It's just there's something a little bit wrong. That's like an Irish person didn't write this.
Yeah. I mean, for me, there are certain parts that are pretty much the lowlights of the whole movie. Like, for some reason, the B&B is a shithole.
Which I don't get. It's like, oh, this is the best room I have. And it's like, thanks. Like, why is that an angle? Is that something about we're just ungrateful and bad hosts?
Look, there are some really old B&Bs in Ireland that probably aren't the best. But what do you expect? And why are you portraying all of Ireland as the shitty
I found that kind of big, because I think, you know, the character, the B&B owner, Evelyn, I think she's a wonderful character. She's very much like the Mrs. Doyle from Father Ted, but definitely kind of an Irish, kind of almost granny, nana kind of person. She's like the older kind of Irish woman.
And they drag on that he's cold thing for so long. Like, it's like, just buy a fucking hot water bottle.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a big deal.
It's like, I think there is a certain type of Irish person, definitely, that, you know, it's like, oh, it's always cold. Like, close the windows, put on the heating, and then whatever. So I get like you're from New York. Like, New York is Baltic. It's freezing.
Which brings me to another point. He's from New York, and there's a certain point in the movie where they could have really used just a New York catchphrase, even flip it, because he's reading a book while walking down the street. And
Hey, I'm walking here.
Yeah, exactly. He's walking down the street, he knocks into someone because he's reading a book, and I would have loved it if the Irish guy said to him, I'm walking here. That's all I needed.
Yeah.
Roll credits, end of movie.
It's like Dustin Hoffman. Yeah, so I think like it's oddly endearing. I don't get some of the choices, but anyway, to leave it kind of up there, Michael does end up getting off with Sarah, and everything is wonderful. And the mayor's assistant, Doyle, tries to get in an outside leprechaun expert to kind of say, no, there's no leprechauns there without seeing it. And he's like, oh, that's not right. So the leprechauns, apparently, although it's not seen, kind of cause him misfortune, and he chases bits of gold and gets hit by a car and ends up in the hospital. He's like, oh no, I'm dropping that now. I don't want the little people to come after me.
It brought something to my attention that you could almost recut this movie into a fucking horror movie.
You could, actually, quite easily.
There's this one weird part where Adrian Pasdara's character wakes up in the middle of the night and there's a fucking pine cone under him.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is creepy. I mean, this could be the start of a horror film. Like, at certain points, there's a fucking tractor always going past. The same tractor always going past. And it's like, this could be a horror movie.
Or just that the fella on the bike could be the murderer or something, isn't he?
Even that was another weird thing, because obviously they had it in the script that he was going to be on a bike.
Yeah.
And then your man was going to have the little moped. But, like, from a health and safety point of view, what lunatic is cycling around Ireland in the middle of the snowiest winter we've ever had?
I don't, like, I really, like, I get the character is like, oh, the guy he meets at the crossroads and brings him into the town. There's like a certain Irish hospitality and welcoming there. And
I thought he was going to be a leprechaun or an elf or something.
Yeah, I really thought, this guy will actually be the leprechaun, the king of the leprechauns the whole time.
Yeah, something weird. Because he had that elfy look.
Yeah, I thought they were kind of going for that. I mean, but it just didn't go anywhere, and I'm like, oh, that's...
Yeah, he's just a guy.
Clearly, well, if I'd written it, it would have been a much different film. So then, unfortunately, Seamus dies, the old fella, which is kind of comes a bit out of nowhere.
Well, no, it doesn't, because they foreshadow it when Sarah Kavanagh says that the Banshee is wailing around the place.
Yes, and
for some reason.
And if you listen to our previous podcast, you'd know exactly what that means.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. You don't actually hear it. Like, just after that, Adrian Pasdara's character hears the leprechauns, which is a really squeaky kind of pitter-patter.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is just weird. Like, just give them normal noises.
Yeah, I just thought it was a bit odd. I mean... But
anyway. It was very much Lucky Charms leprechauns compared to what we had in Darby O'Gill.
So anyway, you get Seamus's funeral then, which is quite a brief affair by Irish funeral standards, I would have thought. And we don't really get the whole everyone says something at the graveside like that.
No, there's something even weirder than that. They played Amazing Grace on a bagpipe.
Which...
And I've never heard Amazing Grace played in Ireland.
I don't think, like, they'd play... Bagpipes at a funeral isn't exactly a million miles off something you'd have in Ireland, but...
Like, it's an occasional thing? You wouldn't get it a lot?
Like a very big funeral maybe, but I've never been at one myself that has had that, but Amazing Grace at funeral...
And we're Irish, we've been at a lot of funerals.
Oh yeah.
People are dying all the time.
I've never heard Amazing Grace being played at a funeral before.
Yeah, it's weird. I found it weird just for, like, obviously Americans would
identify with
it, but it was strange, and I don't understand why an Irish person in the scene wouldn't have pointed it out.
Yeah, it's also the whole thing of them just standing around the coffin going into the ground isn't. I thought that was like a little church thing that was actually quite nice. Yeah. I thought that was not inaccurate, but I never really seen that whole people just quietly kind of talking around the grave. It's a very American kind of movie.
Yeah, having the kind of, everyone says their piece before.
Yeah, you do that afterwards in the pub at the wake.
Yeah.
You wouldn't really the wake beforehand, or like in the pub afterwards. I mean.
Yeah, definitely after with a big pint in your hand.
Just like reminiscing about the person who passed away, and it's Anyway, so Seamus has passed away, unfortunately. That kind of motivates him, and Michael's boss comes over from America. It's like, we gotta get this sorted and get all our ducks in a row and things. The kind of film that winds up at this point is just like, oh well, they found a solution that'll make everyone happy by kind of leaving some leprechauns there and redirecting things. And
yeah, they're leaving some land to the leprechauns, and then they're using the rest of the land. But his then solution to stay in Ireland is just another weird thing. It was like, he's a fixer for the company, and he's like, I'm going to stay on as plant supervisor. It's like, that's not how jobs work.
Also, isn't that like a massive demotion for you?
But, like, obviously he doesn't care if it's a demotion because he wants to stay in Ireland.
Yeah.
But it's just, if I walked up to my boss and said, okay, I want to work over there now, I am his boss.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. You don't just tell people what your job is now.
I mean, he could find a job working there. I'm
Work in a
in the
fucking
town.
pub.
Work, yeah. I mean, if you're going to marry Sarah and like run the pub with her, I mean, you could run the pub and she could just be a full-time leprechaun tour giver.
Hunter or something. Another thing, the amount of PDAs in this movie. No Irish person does that, just shifting in the pub.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
okay, in a nightclub.
Okay, first off,
we have to explain
wait a minute.
that.
Shifting is our version of making out, because to us making out sounds like what children say.
I just like. Oh, we should have just said, "What the hell is shifting?" Just Google that.
We need to explain these things. So
you don't do that in a pub, yeah.
Yeah, you don't just like stand in the middle of the pub
some
and
decency.
do that. I mean, in a nightclub where it's dark,
yeah,
fine.
But
not in a pub, because it's just a little too much. Like a peck, fine. But anything more than that is weird.
Yeah, so that's it. So I mean, that's kind of the gist of the film, and he just stays there, and he's like Leprechaun said, there's a little hat left on the counter, and someone's robbed his pint. So all good there. What did you think, Stu, overall?
Well, as I said, it's not a terrible movie. I mean, I enjoyed it for what it was. There were some weird moments. There were some good moments. I mean, he had a great line. Poor old Seamus was, to be Irish, you have to blame all misfortunes on the government.
Yes,
which we do.
Oh yeah. Absolutely, that was accurate. I think there's a great line the said about the mayor as well by his assistant Doyle. Oh, sorry, I think the mayor actually says this. I'm a politician. I believe what the people believe. When discussing about leprechauns,
which is pretty much all politicians.
Yeah.
So that was pretty good.
But there's a bit, I think, as well. But the best line of the films too, of course, is when Michael and Sarah are up on the mountain having their cup of tea in a little flask and sitting out in the snow, and Sarah turns to him and says, "Someone not from Ireland, you sure know how to talk a lot of Blarney."
Hey.
Roll credits.
That's all we needed to hear. We love the movie. It is the best. They shouted out the podcast. I mean, we have to give them that.
Into 8 years before the podcast made. That's how long we planned this.
They said it. We created a podcast based off of how bad it was, and without having watched it, we picked Blarney, which is in it. So I think that's good. I think we've got it.
We should definitely tweet this at Amy Huberman and your man.
So everyone who's listening, tweet at Brian O'Driscoll. Release the Blarney cut. Just another point I wanted to make. Do we really have town mayors? Is that a thing?
No. The thing about this is now, I mean,
our towns are so small. Why would you need a mayor, really?
I'll just to speak briefly about Irish politics and that kind of the way it works here. At the time the film was shot, we would have still had town councils. We don't anymore. In Ireland, we have local government on a kind of generally county basis and city bases, so we don't really have anything devolved in that. There's like different areas in each county that would have like elect councillors. So it's a little bit odd. It's not inaccurate in a sense. It's just that instead of it being the mayor and him being like a local politician, it would probably be like a civil servant from the county council based in the area. But I mean, it's not a million miles off, though, is the thing.
Yeah, it's just a little odd. So I've realised that I have a lot more grievances. This is just going to become the podcast now. Every time we watch a really bad movie, I'm going to have a list of grievances that I'm going to go through and complain about and curse over. So first off, at the beginning, when the guy on the bicycle comes along, he starts saying, well, there's Bally this and Bally that, Bally everything else. And it's like, this isn't funny.
That's not okay. Firstly,
Bally is a word that we use for place names, but everything isn't called Bally.
Yeah, there's that like Bally. I will say the Irish name of the town is Ballyglen is the name of the town or village. Ballyglen is what is given in Irish. That would roughly translate as that, but Bally in Irish place names comes from the Irish Bally, which just means town.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go over to America and they'll be like, oh, we have New York and we have New Jersey and New Brunswick.
New Brunswick, which is in Canada.
Close enough. I really thought I had it there.
I didn't know where that was going.
I couldn't think of another place with New Vegas? No.
Well, that hasn't happened yet.
Damn. Soon, though.
Soon.
See, they're going to come along with another new.
So, yeah, I thought that was something anyway, but I think, like, Ballyglen isn't a real place in Ireland. People might be shocked to hear.
There's a Ballyglen Art Museum, but that's about it. It's in Ballycastle.
It's in Mayo, isn't it?
Yeah, which is in Mayo.
It
could be where it is. I mean, you have the coast there as well. It's really close. It's just really hard to say.
Yeah, I did try and look up this, if there's anywhere called Ballyglen, or even like by the Irish version that's given in the film, there isn't. I don't know. There's like Bally is quite a common place in certain parts of the country, but you know, like Bally or Kill is a very common Irish place at the start of an Irish place name.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Kildare, Ballycummin, etc. I won't just like list off Irish place names that people have no
because
context
then you'll
of.
be basically repeating what the guy in the movie did.
Yeah.
Which would be stupid. So, the next thing then is woolen everything. We don't go around wearing fucking sheep all the time. We wear normal clothes.
I can kind of get the bit where like Michael is kind of like, oh, I'm going to become Irish, and he goes into the shop and has like the big Aran woolen jumper and like the flat paddy cap. And I can kind of get that as like, oh, it's like, this is what you think we wear. And then if we went into shame, it's like, we don't wear that at all. I don't really think it's a thing. Like, maybe people in the islands or like in the Irish speaking areas wear
possibly
them. I don't know.
Some people in more rural areas, but in general, you know, we go to a place called Penny's, which you might know as Primark.
Yeah.
And we buy normal clothes there.
Like myself and Stewie, you can't see us because this is a podcast. We're both wearing like plaid shirts and jeans at the moment.
So, not exactly your traditional Irish garb.
I will say that I think Seamus, the old fella in the pub, was wearing like pretty much what you think an old fella would wear, kind of like the old jacket.
I mean,
and
yeah,
stuff.
they have
was
stuff
accurate.
like that.
Yeah.
And you know, the lads being barflies inside in the pub was pretty much. There are people where you'd go in every day of the week and they'd just be sitting there in their same spot drinking. I wouldn't know about dominoes though. I've never seen anyone play dominoes in a pub. Except for in university.
I have seen it in one or two pubs. It's generally older people would play it, I think is what it was. You weren't allowed to really play cards in a pub because gambling was illegal at the time, and if they saw you playing cards they would have thought it's for money. So
they're going to hell.
Well, they're going to hell, but also like card playing was banned by the British in a lot of pubs, and a lot of those bylaws actually carried over. So
okay, one last thing and then I have an actual good thing. So at one point they're talking, Adrian Pastar and Amy Huberman, and for some reason she says, oh, you're like Irish moss. It's like, okay, I checked this up. There is a specific breed of moss called Irish moss, but just call it fucking moss. It's like, oh, you're like an Irish jumper. It's like, just a jumper. Just call it the same thing.
It just reminds me of, I think it's a live in Keenan and Kel or something. So I just go to France and ask for fries, they'll know what I'm talking about.
Exactly. Just call it moss. But so the good thing is that they actually refuted one of the most annoying lines that people from other countries say to us, which is top of the morning to you.
God. We don't say that.
Yeah,
only if we're doing it ironically.
And in this movie,
we say that.
They fought back against that. They knew that it was wrong, and they said so, which is probably the only good thing this movie has done for the entire country, except for probably some money that came in.
Yeah, and you know, they tried. They did honestly try to not completely paddy this up, but...
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that stood to it the most was having an all-Irish cast, except for, obviously, the New Yorker. One thing that I found a bit weird, and I think this comes with Irish actors in general, is... So Amy Huberman is from Dublin.
Yeah.
And so when she tries to put on a neutral Irish accent...
It doesn't really sound right.
Odd. It's similar to Saoirse Ronan. It's a very strange accent that they affect when they're doing it.
There is the thing I'll say as well, with the accents of the Irish people, they don't have consistent accents in the village, which is a bit weird. Now, I can kind of gather that, okay, some people might have moved there and everything else, and fair enough. It doesn't say what part of Ireland it is in. I mean, we know what part it was shot in. Also, he has like Limerick Reg in his car. Yeah. It's like there's L for Limerick. All of our counties have a letter for their license plates, basically, or two letters. So it's a bit weird. Like, Seamus is kind of like an older, like has a more kind of rougher, older kind of accent. I would have said he's from kind of the country somewhere, kind of the Midlands. The two Barfly fellas, one has a Clare accent, the other has more of a it's got a neutral North Dublin accent, I would have said. The young fella has a Tip accent, you know. Yeah, it's a bit all over the place. Sarah does have I would have said, it's definitely not a rural accent. She said she's from the town. It's like, so that's the default accent then for the town. Yeah, it's a bit odd. Which is weird. I mean, we don't have a lot of actors because most of them go to the UK anyway. Yeah, which is a topic for another day. But you know, just to say, there is a larger variation of accents in Ireland, even though we're quite a small island, small nation, than people maybe realise. But there is a consistency to it, unless you're from another part and move to another part of Ireland. you know, there is more of a consistency there. And that's just something I just noticed. I mean, it's just a small thing. I mean, I suppose I can't blame the Americans too much for that because, you know, if you had like a proper North Side dub, someone from like Ballynanty and Limerick City, and then someone from like, you know, the proper north end of Donegal, good luck understanding them. So I can understand why they kind of said tone it down a little bit.
I suppose the only really big trope I saw in the movie was Seamus himself being the kind of the old wise man
who knows all the stories. So
he kind of, just a little bit of spoilers, but I think we've pretty much spoiled it anyway. I
did read the plot.
At one point he randomly says to Garrett, he says the story of King Solomon cutting a baby in half, and that comes up at the end. Then Adrian Pastar's character realizes that he can do this with the land to keep the leprechauns happy, and it's just like, okay, so he said something earlier on that made no sense, but then later on was like, oh yeah, we should do this. Like, common sense would tell you if they're over there and we can just go over here.
We could just build around them or whatever. It's just odd. I didn't really get that whole Solomon story thing. It's like,
I mean, I guess it's kind of the Irish people love Jesus.
Yeah, but surely wouldn't it make sense for him to tell a story about like an Irish mythical story that was kind of about a similar vein? I can get the kind of Catholicism thing or even the Christianity thing, but the whole film is about fairies. Like, this is pre-Christian Ireland stories. It's just a weird kind of departure you'd make, because there isn't really any other mention of religion at all until his funeral, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, and there were like the bench that Seamus just tended to be chilling on in the middle of the night for some reason. That's probably how he died.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say if someone in his like 70s or 80s sits on a bench at 2 a.m. when it's snowing out,
cold,
he's probably gonna get hypothermia and die.
I'd also say that Sarah goes, I do have closing hours in my pub at one point. I mean, Jesus, you clearly don't go by what the laws are if you're doing lock-ins till 2:30 in the morning. I suppose I don't think we see a guard at all, or a policeman. We call them guards over here.
Yeah.
At all in the film, so clearly it's the right place to do it.
Yeah, that was another weird thing. I think the tractors are the Gardaí there.
The two slight takeaways I'd say of a stereotypical Irish town that's missing. Firstly, a priest, and then secondly, a guard police officer.
Yeah. I suppose the last thing really to talk about then is the leprechauns themselves, which obviously we don't see. They're invisible, which is something that leprechauns can do. But as we said earlier, it's just that weird high-pitched jingling. I thought it was like, it might as well have been Alvin and the Chipmunks who were sneaking around doing all of the shit, stealing his keys.
Secret!
And putting a pine cone in his bed. It was weird. It was just really weird.
I think, I was thinking about this, and I think it was an interesting choice. I kind of like it in one sense because, you know, there's certain bits of it where you can be like, are there actually leprechauns there, or is he
having a mental breakdown?
Is he having a mental breakdown, or is it just? It's like, it's all kind of things. Oh, like he lost his keys. They were in his pocket the whole time, and it's like you could think, okay, maybe leprechauns didn't do that. Maybe he's just forgetful. There's that little bit. Okay, and then towards the end, like the little hat is on the bar and someone drank his pint, so you clearly okay, they're real at that point. But I actually kind of prefer the thing that they didn't try to do like the Derby O'Gid and have like badly done CGI leprechauns or have someone from a distance. I think that was probably a better choice, just to have them kind of unseen. Although I do take the point that we kind of said earlier that the fella on the bicycle at the very start who turns up again at the end.
Yeah, he should definitely.
He should have been like a leprechaun or a fairy or something, or King of the Fairies. I think they completely missed out on a trick there.
Could have been planned and they cut it out or something. But I was just expecting him to like disappear into like a puff of smoke or something at the very end of the movie, which he did not.
There's something I kind of want to talk about here. Another thing about the realism that is it entirely possible that an American company is like trying to build on this land and then couldn't do it because there were leprechauns there or superstitions? Now, this isn't entirely something that's just been made up. There is a kernel of truth to things like this. Yeah. I think I kind of mentioned it in the last podcast a little bit, where I said there was an Irish road that had to be moved around because there was a fairy tree there and a banshee lived there. I looked into this a little bit more because I did remember driving past it a couple of times. It's in a place in County Clare outside Newmarket and Fergus, which if you ever fly into Shannon Airport, you will be very close to it. Our President Michael D. Higgins grew up there in Newmarket and Fergus, as did some of my family. So basically there's a motorway going out from Limerick to Galway, and there's a weird kind of bend in it and a weird kind of turn in it, and there's also like an overpass there as well, and the slip roads going up to the overpass take a weird tangent as well. There's like almost a little triangle of land there with this very big bushy tree, and it's a fairy tree. And due to canvassing by a local historian, Eddie Lenihan was his name, he was a Shanachie as well, an Irish storyteller. He basically campaigned to get this moved because it was a fairy tree, and he lobbied local politicians, had written into the local paper, and he literally said, this is where the fun starts.
And I think it cost millions, didn't it?
Oh, it cost millions to do this. It doesn't look like it's a massive detour. I'm showing Stu a picture of this now. You can kind of see it's a little bit wide, but it knocks all the roads out of symmetry. And they had to like go back and redo things, but this was generally seen as not an unpopular thing in the kind of area. People had heard the stories, people knew about it, and yeah, so to say like the whole thing about the Leprechauns disrupting something being built, it isn't a million miles away from things that have happened in Ireland. Like there were bits as well in other parts of the country where housing estates stop at weird points because there used to be like fairy forts there or similar trees as well where they tried to cut down the tree with the chainsaws and the chainsaw broke still.
Yeah. I was kind of curious about why they picked copper though, because I don't think we have a very big copper mining industry here. I mean zinc, I know.
Yes.
But
I think
not
copper...
since the Bronze Age have we really done a lot of copper.
Yeah, I found that a bit... It's like,
we're just being
really
pedantic,
copper.
really. But that's what we do on the show.
I mean, gold, fair enough, like leprechauns and gold. I wouldn't have thought would be the worst thing in the world, so maybe. But that was something I wanted to just mention, being like, are we that crazy and backward? In certain parts of the country, yes, we are.
I think every country has their own kind of quirks.
I think it kind of goes into like what the mayor says in the thing. Oh, I'm a politician. I'll believe what the people believe in. Literally, what happened in Clare with that motorway.
Yeah, pretty much. So I suppose we'll give our ratings.
Yeah, I mean overall, not a fantastic film.
No,
it's not winning an Oscar anytime soon. I think Adrian Pasdar, I really should have looked at how to pronounce his name correctly, but it's Americans, like it's going to be wrong. Did a pretty good job. I think he actually comes off as quite genuine in parts.
Yeah,
I think he's
really good.
He gave a good performance. Like,
it's odd seeing him, who I've seen in bigger roles,
and heroes and all that. Yeah. I think overall he did a good job. Yeah. I wouldn't have said he didn't ham it up. I don't think he even like when he was being Irish, quote unquote, he didn't paddy it up too much. I think he did it. I quite enjoyed watching him and see. I think he really kind of catches your presence. Amy Huberman did a good job as Sarah. I mean, is
it Huberman or Huberman?
I'm saying Huberman. I mean, I'd probably get slapped with Mrs. O'Driscoll, but Amy did a great job there.
Ah, there we go.
We'll fix it in post. It's fine. I think she's a good job. She's one of the better known Irish kind of actresses in Ireland who isn't Saoirse Ronan, I guess you could say. Did a good job, absolutely there. I think as well some of the ancillary characters like Terry Byrne who played Seamus. I looked him up a little bit. He'd done a couple of other kind of small roles, but I think he kind of does the kind of Darby O'Gill. He kind of comes across like this Irish grandfather. I know he was in Game of Thrones. He played Septon.
A Septon. So the Septons are kind of like priests almost.
I haven't seen Game of Thrones. You will discover this in later episodes.
Everyone, try to figure out how we can connect Game of Thrones to Ireland, and then we'll get him. Same with Harry Potter. He's never seen a Harry Potter movie. Do it quickly.
I've seen 2 of them.
2 of them. He has 5 left.
Maybe I've seen
6. I can't remember.
I honestly don't know. I haven't heard good things about the play, but that's a different, that's a different story.
Or the writer.
No. Cut this. But I think the other performances, I mean, I think Evelyn, played by Marion O'Dwyer, comes off quite well, and she's definitely like the kind of Irish mammy. I think the stylistic choices in it with the hostelies there, the B&B staying and being crap, are not her fault as an actress. Yeah, no, there's no way that's her fault. She did a really good job. She was like the local Irish gossip, which she played really well, just kind of sneaking around the background, trying to listen into conversations and phone calls. Yeah, so I mean, like some of the other kind of characters, like, Doyle, Tommy, Molly, I think they're just sort of... They do their job. There's nothing really against them. The old regulars in the pub, I thought they just look the part.
Oh yeah.
I think they just looked the part, and I was quite happy with that.
I think they wrapped filming, and the lads just sat there and had a few more pints.
Yeah, I did say, as soon as I saw them in the background, I was like, I know you from Killinascully.
Yeah.
It was one of the fellas, was Sergeant Dick from Killinascully, which is an Irish, I don't know if I'd call it a sitcom.
It's a comedy TV show.
Comedy TV show.
Which we might get to once.
We'll get to someday.
If we ever run out of the bad ones, we'll start doing some good ones.
once we, if you want to kind of see Irish comedy, certainly some Irish characters by an Irish person, look up Pat Short and John Kenny, either as Dumb Believables or on their own. That's a fantastic little foray into Irishness. But I think the acting in this film wasn't too bad overall. I think it didn't go into farce too much.
Right.
I think it didn't distract from the film too much. I think just the premise itself was a bit distracting at times, but I don't think the actors did a bad job.
Right, so what's your rating, Rob? Crack of gold or crack of shite?
Crack of copper. I think I'd have to go. I think I'd have to go as far as say to
golden copper or
maybe
copper ore.
Maybe. Like not awful is what I'll say. It's a good 6.5 out of 10 film. It's alright.
I'm gonna say crack of shite straight out.
Really? Oh, I thought there were some redeeming features to it.
There were,
yeah,
but not enough to redeem the nonsense that went on.
There was a lot of nonsense, but I think it's not an awful film. I mean,
I'll give it one piece of gold for the "you're not English" bit, because
that was very good.
That just kills.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's a very good line. And the talking Blarney bit as well. We definitely should cut that. We'd like to see if we can license that line.
So if you want to send in your own ratings and reviews, go right ahead. You can find us at talkingblarneypod@gmail.com. Before we end the show, I want to give a quick shout out to the Crunt1 on Reddit, who actually gave us our new podcast icon, which is fantastic because we're both really bad at editing images.
Yep.
So if you want to review the show, you can go ahead and do that on the podcast app of your choice and follow or sub to us on that. Of course, please tell a friend about the show.
I would also like to say thank you to everyone in Orshlas Ireland and Reddit when we put up the first thing, got feedback. Guys, that was so nice of all of you. Thank you so much if you're listening. I found all of your suggestions very interesting. I myself and Steve have looked into them, and one bit in particular about Stage Irish Wikipedia article, which is something really interesting, which I've talked to Steve about.
We'll have a deep dive on that.
We're going to have a deep dive.
Learned as much as we can.
Yeah, we will. But I think thank you guys for listening. It was a lot of fun watching this again and talking about it. But Stu, next time, what are you thinking? What will we do?
So next time we are going to watch The Foreigner, and so we're putting it out ahead of time so that you guys can watch it as well. If you want to send in a review beforehand, we can read it out on the show. We might read out a few of your ratings as well for the previous episode and for the podcast as a whole. You can send that again to talkingblarneypod@gmail.com, or you can get us on Twitter @blarneypod.
Or shout at us in the street, that also works.
Yeah, if you can find us, which you shouldn't be able to because that's creepy, shout at us in the street apparently. So once again, tell a friend, and thanks for listening, guys. See you next week.
Take care.
Oh yeah, new podcasts every Monday. Pints?
Cans.